I have a routine of face tuning where I really know what works for my face.
Just really bring out her inner beauty.
I don't know who Real Marsha is anymore. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
She like carved her back out, made her ass larger.
Okay, so I'm just looking at my script right now, feeling a little bit overwhelmed just because of how long it is. In any case, recently I stumbled upon a few videos on YouTube about plastic surgery, about Facetune, as well as unrealistic beauty standards, like this videos by Tiffany Ferg and Jordan Teresa. There were a few other ones that I've seen, but I can't like fully remember which ones they were, so I'm not going to say anything right now. Maybe I'm gonna link them in the description if I stumble upon them again or find them in my history, like watch history. And a lot of those videos focus on Facetune and Instagram models. Then right after, I saw some pictures on Instagram recommended on my like explore page, pictures of Rosé from Blackpink and like comparisons or whatever the hell, and people just speculating about her having surgeries before she had her debut. And it made me think about the effects of the media and the visually driven culture of the recent years on people's self-esteem and identity. So I decided to make this video talking about the information that I found. First of all, I want to mention that we will be discussing cosmetic plastic surgery, not reconstructive plastic surgery in this specific video, as well as we will be looking at social media culture filled with body and face modifications that form these new ideals that we are exposed to every single day. So there have been a discourse about more acceptance of different types of beauty. The conversation itself varies quite a bit from culture to culture, and we will touch on that in the next video where we will be focusing on that specifically. However, even though we're seemingly talking about variety, diversity, body positivity more than ever before, the cosmetic procedures have actually been reported to be on the rise in the recent years. Now, let's look at some of the stats and trends in plastic surgery in the recent years. So I compared 2019 numbers and 2015 numbers, as well as some 2007 numbers. All of these numbers come from American Association of Plastic Surgery, as well as some of the numbers I originally found in this text that I'm going to be referencing a lot. I will explain that text a little bit later, but the numbers originally, all of them came from American Plastic Surgery Association. A lot of us who remember growing up in 2000s, like in the early 2000s, we remember how many people were obsessed with this specific look of having big breasts and having a small butt, and or not having a butt at all. There was an obsession with being extremely skinny. The 90s were also very much about that. And it seems like the pendulum moved away from that look, from breast implants to breast implant removal actually. So the numbers show that the breast implant numbers have dropped and the breast implant removal has risen in the recent years. However, butt implants kind of had the opposite thing going on, which is not surprising knowing our today's beauty standards. And this does show that people literally go under a knife to follow these trends, whether subconsciously or not. When it comes to gender, the male cosmetic surgery procedures are increasing, but they're still minimal to compare to the female ones. More men are having cosmetic surgery done and more women becoming cosmetic surgeons. But it will take a lot of years to kind of even out that misbalance. And most of all, there has been a noticeable increase in procedures done on people that are under 18. So why is that? There are a few things that plastic surgeons have been talking about, especially like their thoughts on the uptick in the procedures. They have noticed that people are more accepting of surgeries, socially speaking, so they're not that afraid, to let others know that they have had something done, or basically it's just not that frowned upon as it used to be, so people are more likely to get it. At least that's what they're thinking. It's one of the reasons why they think that it could be increasing. The second thing is the wider availability of procedures, of course, and the lower cost of those procedures. But it seems like it's not quite that simple when you look closer. When talking about modifications to bodies, be it physical or digital, we of course cannot avoid the conversation of the gaze. Our ideals are defined by our surroundings. I will get into why I think that there's a correlation that can be proved by numbers and other, like just by stats, but we're just gonna go with this idea for now. So our ideals are defined by our surroundings, or they are at the very least influenced by them. The gaze, in many ways, is an idea that is closely related to Guy Debord's idea of the spectacle, which in the context of this video will most of the time be named the screen, because I'm going to be talking about the influence of being online and being participants of the visual culture that we're in and being influenced by it in many ways. So here's where we arrived at the explanation of what kind of texts I have read for this video. There has been a few, but I kind of decided to go with a specific one, which is this MIT Press publication by Bernadette Wittgenstein. I don't know how to pronounce a lot of names. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. But Bernadette has this quote where she describes the screen, because she's also talking about the same kind of ideas. The screen is a site that society looks at to find itself represented. It is the place that the gaze is destined to look at and to be made for. So it's kind of like the same idea of the spectacle, the gaze being combined to talk about the screen. The images on our screens, they were made for us. In the case of social media, for example, our networks such as Instagram, it looks this way because of what we want to see. Because this relationship between us seeing something and being seen by other people is such a codependent thing. When an Instagram model posts a picture that makes her look perfect, it's not necessarily just speaking about her looks, but her surroundings and her lifestyle as well. She receives more likes, she receives more shares and follows. She will get more engagement than if she shows a side of herself that's not going to be considered perfect. At least perfect in the terms of most of the people that come across her content. In this way, we're the ones who are sending her messages of what we want to see without actually saying anything, while simultaneously we're communicating these ideals that we co-sign onto to other people in our lives who also start seeing the same images because they start getting recommended to them. It is a codependent relationship where we collectively decide what gets to be idolized based on sheer numbers that lack much depth or nuance, but tell a real story of what is like the overall consensus and what we as a society of the spectacle expect to see from ourselves. So let's consider examples of the same relationship but in other forms, where people address this weird codependent audience spectacle relationship but like consciously explored it in their mediums. So first of all, there's Dzika Vetrov's 1920s Kino Pravda. It was a series of films, issues, you can interchangeably use that word, either film or an issue, that explored the audience's participation as part of trying to capture the truth. Because Vetrov's idea was that there is no way a filmmaker can film something in the most truthful way if it's only one perspective that's shaping it, especially where an audience is supposed to be participating in the conversation. In any case, you can look it up. It's one of the examples that kind of works within this idea. And the second one that would be more contemporary and more people would likely know about what I'm talking about, that's Bo Burnham's Make Happy comedy special on Netflix. So he quite literally talks about the performance while he is performing and makes an entire show around this like weird gaze that we both cast on others and on ourselves at the same time. It's kind of reflective of our experience on social media, that we are both presenting ourselves on social media, we are looking at other people on social media, we have expectations of other people and of ourselves, and we're all holding each other up to a specific standard that we're all setting with modifications that we're creating around ourselves. So consumerism and commodification of augmentation. One of the reasons why contemporary society is obsessed with going and modifying their looks is due to the commodification of the act itself, the act of change. Some people start seeing it as a way to glow up. And we use that word quite liberally, especially right now, by us, I mean Gen Zers and probably like some millennials as well. Maybe it's trickling down into other age groups, but we love to use this whole idea of glowing up as a way to create content, as a way to gain sometimes what people associate with respect and other things like that. We have a lot writing on this specific idea and concept of change. And this glow up concept is not just exclusive to social media. It has been around for quite some time. The whole idea of going from the ugly duckling to being a swan or whatever the hell. Oftentimes, this change is presented to us as the ultimate point where we go from looking like one person to another, transforming our entire existence in the process. With the conception of stories about modification, the stories become part of the gaze. We see it all the time. So in turn, we start to see ourselves in it. The more we see something being done and the more we see it being portrayed as a natural part of becoming an adult or becoming a full person or becoming a best version of ourselves, the more we see ourselves in those same scenarios. Hence the trend of glow up videos on YouTube and on TikTok, because people start talking about less invasive procedures as maintenance and as looking after yourself. The assumption can quickly slip into assuming that people who didn't do something or who don't do certain parts of this upkeep are lazy or poor. And this is another whole part of this conversation that we have to address because it's so glaringly obvious that we are perpetuating this classist ideas. We're still in the very early stages of when things become available to everyone. Still, there's some patterns that we should talk about. With more and more procedures becoming normalized by the gaze, we are moving that line of what is the bare minimum. We're moving it further and further away from what we look like naturally without those modifications. This relationship between money, looks, and opportunities brings upon an obvious question of classism. I tried to look for more elaborate thought experiments that are in different types of mediums, like a movie or a story or a book or something like that. I found a couple of things that I want to talk about here, which was the first one is this 2005 science fiction book by Scott Westerfeld and named Uglies. I remember reading that book when I was about 12 years old or something like that, and now looking this up, I feel the same way, at least as far as I remember, as I felt back then when I was reading it, that it does not explore the issue for what it is on its own. I remember when I was reading it, I thought that the book was gonna go in a completely different direction. I didn't think that it was gonna become this book where they literally say that when you go to become a pretty instead of being an ugly, that you would have your brain modified as well and you would be made into a more compliant person, that basically you would give away your identity in order to be beautiful. This book, by the way, I've put the description on the screen, but just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea if you haven't read it, it's just a book about a society where everyone gets to go through the surgery at the age of 16 and you're made into a very beautiful person by some sort of standard. I think it's a uniform standard for everyone. Not everyone looks the same, but they all kind of start looking the same because obviously our standards are quite narrow already, but imagine a world where everyone gets beautiful. The beauty standard would get insanely narrow, right? I kind of thought that back then that maybe they're gonna go into talking about, more of a real kind of approach to it by saying something like, here is this world where you can get this surgery and these are the effects that happened after everyone started to get those surgeries. More of a serious conversation on the reality of those modifications and how they could potentially influence us, instead of being a book about this, oh, here's a thing that's kind of interesting about this dystopian future. Let's just add another layer that basically simplifies it. So the book doesn't explore plastic surgery or everyone looking the same. It does not provide a world where this has been normalized without some kind of whacking on the brain being involved, Through this book, I found another thing, which was this episode of Twilight Zone named Number 12 Looks Just Like You. But once again, there was just a sudden change to mental state and to your personality that was involved in the procedure, which removed all hope being had of a more nuanced conversation about this topic. So because we can't find something that provides us with this hypothetical example, we're gonna have to just go ahead and talk about it more abstractly. So let's talk about the first hypothetical of a society where surgery would be available to everyone and it would be available for no cost at all. Would the procedure then low-key become compulsory because of pretty privilege not only being a thing, because it's already a thing, but also because of beauty standards narrowing more and more because of never-ending race of an organic matter, an organic body, trying to look unchanged or trying to look current with the times and with the standards that are being idealized at that time? Would it become completely like, oh, you're just lazy that you didn't do this or you didn't get that done? Or would we completely try to remove ourselves from the reality of the organic body changing and not being a static thing? Would we potentially just look the same, like number 12 looks just like you, where we would just mimic each other based on an image that would be the most profitable at the time? Because without any modifications being made to our brains, we would still be under the sheer power of capitalism driving what we are doing, because otherwise we would be crushed into poverty otherwise, because we are not up to par of what is considered to be attractive, successful, wealthy, etc. In the case of surgery being available but being still paid for, would we, in the pursuit of our aesthetic ideals, push the lower and middle class below the poverty line because of our standards being unattainable without extreme modification? Would we just keep on doing the same thing that we're doing now, but like at an extreme level because it would be more available, but at the same time would still be an expensive procedure that requires upkeep and requires all of those resources? Like, we already, a lot of models on Instagram and stuff like that, they already have a lot of features in common. A lot of them, especially when Kylie's like lips got big in many ways, in many meanings of the word, people started to mimic her look, wear the same exact lipstick, overline the lips the exact same way, and some of it is just part of trends and part of how society works and how our fashion and other influences change. But at the same time, some of it was a little bit more dramatic, right? Like, if you're getting your lips done, you would have to go to the doctors, you would have to, not always doctors, because like a lot of beauticians don't have the certification or whatever the hell, like it's a whole other mess. But you would be going somewhere and doing this procedure. Is there a line where we're crossing into a territory where we're being unreasonable? Obviously, there are a lot of examples in the world where the person gets addicted to it. It's kind of one of those things that a lot of people get addicted to random things. It's not like this specific thing is addicting, but a lot of people do say that Facetune became like an addiction to them because they got so used to seeing themselves a certain way.
I have to admit, sometimes you just get so obsessed with like all the tools and all the possibilities that you get carried away a little bit.
Which is, again, influences the whole idea of the gaze and the fact that we influence the gaze and the gaze influences us back. Anyway, in both cases, we are creating an environment that would disadvantage people who are not perfectly attractive. And as much as we like to delude ourselves into thinking that we can be perfect, we are just organic matter and it never stays the same. So our pursuit will never end, while potentially also making our existence a lot more difficult and a lot more restricted. It would also bring up questions of, ageism, because if we're still aging, and obviously there's a point at which you cannot be looking as a young person anymore, so you wouldn't be at the peak of the attractiveness or the beauty standard. Do you lose your value as a person then? Like, is that what we're gonna be putting out into the world? Is like, where is the line of where we're moving into danger, like a dangerous zone where we are creating more body dysmorphia in the world and we're creating more negative effects rather than positive effects with those changes? We don't know when we start being unreasonable, and everyone has different lines that they wouldn't cross, but it's interesting. So in this conversation, we always talk about doing something for yourself, right? Like, if you're modifying something, you need to make sure that you're doing it for yourself because you want to stay true to oneself. And this is the conversation that's also, it just opens another Pandora box. I find that there's a quote in Bernadette Zwagenstein's book where she discusses the findings of Kathy Davis's interviews of cosmetic surgery patients in the early 1990s. So this is the quote. Kathy found that the body and the body image have become the location or even fixation for social struggle, shame, and certain inability to go on with regular life, especially in the public realm. Davis notes that women want to use surgery not to become more beautiful, but to become normal-looking people, just like everyone else. They want to blend in, become normal, and not stick out. In their field research of women's motivations for undergoing cosmetic surgery, Kathy Davis and Virginia L. Blum have both shown that most women are doing it for themselves. This argument is also part of the discourse of The Swan. The Swan is a popular show, it was popular in the 90s, of extreme makeovers which involved plastic surgery.
Debra, what was your plan to bring out her beauty?
I think Marcia felt invisible because you really couldn't get a good feel for her features. So the idea was to make her more distinctive, just really bring out her inner beauty.
And many other makeover shows, which seek to excuse the candidate and to absolve her from the sin of wanting to please. In fact, Susan Bordeaux calls the "for me" argument the mantra of the television talk show, and claims that this phase is usually produced to refute the supposition that women are giving in to cultural or societal expectations of the body beautiful. In these constructions, Bordeaux argues, the me is imagined as a pure and precious inner space, an authentic and personal reference point untouched by external values and demands, a place where we live free and won't be pushed around. The question thus arises whether women can be said to choose cosmetic surgery, or whether that choice is overdetermined by a larger patriarchal structure that makes cosmetic surgery seem like the only option for psychological survival in a world hostile to women's bodies. In this part of the text, I found the idea of the real, true self, the pure inner space, to be an interesting point to consider when we say that we're doing something for ourselves, or when someone else says that. We definitely assume that the inner self that we are talking about is not something that was shaped by the images of perfection, right? We're not assuming that our inner self was shaped by the societal ideals that are shown to us in many forms in everyday life. Unfortunately, based on the surveys and data, the one that I mentioned in this whole entire video, or the one that's mentioned in this book, or in the original sources at the American Plastic Surgery Association, we are influenced by what we see, the same way as we influence it back, as we've discussed previously with the gaze. Where the hell do we draw the line of knowing the original source of our desire to acquire a certain look? Should this desire be honored, or should it be reconsidered because of our moral ideals of inner beauty being more important? What do you think? I don't know. Like, I don't want to sound like a person who's like, surgery is bad. Like, I don't care. Like, it's everyone's personal choice, but I do think that it's something that we need to be self-aware of as a society, because it's such a big part of our understanding of each other and understanding of what is the minimum, right, of what you're supposed to do to be considered normal. And most people want to fit in with their surroundings. They want to feel comfortable, they want to feel welcomed, and they want to feel like they belong. And the fact of the matter is, whether we want to ignore the fact that we are influenced by other people doing things, the fact is we need to be thinking about what we're putting out there into the world and what we are consuming ourselves and what we see in what we choose to look at, right? In general, I think that my theory so far, in order for us to not slip into some weird dystopian future of modifications taking over our lives, I think that the main point is that we should not pay attention to as many details as we started to pay attention to because of HD cameras and the obsession with HD things in general. There's no need for us to be looking at our pores up close. There's no need for us to be doing any of that, really. So checking ourselves, maybe keeping ourselves accountable, or trying to be a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more realistic would help. And I think that having these conversations on the regular, updating ourselves, noticing things, paying attention to our surroundings, paying attention to our culture that we are the creators of, is very important. But it's a difficult conversation that involves a lot of things, a lot of influences. It's hard to come to a conclusion where this is a type of thing that affects everyone very differently, because we have very different starting points from the beginning, right? In any case, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!